So we have some new people tonight, and I just want to say welcome to everyone. And I definitely want to say do not worry about where we are at in the system here. Um, Doing the 12 steps is a continuum. So when we do the 12 steps, even in like a workshop situation, there are going to be times when you miss a class or you come late or you whatever. It's okay because it's not a one and done. We're going to do it more than once and we're going to do it the best we can. So if you're here tonight and you're new, don't worry. You will pick it up so fast, you'll be amazed. And we have a really strong, good group here. So if you have any questions, don't hesitate to raise your hand and just speak up. All right. So Bill says on page 58, if you have decided you want what we have and are willing to go to any length to get it, then you are ready to take certain steps. And that's you're welcome to the workshop. So tonight we're going to be looking at step 10, which is the spot check inventory. And if you raise your virtual hand if you have a question after the PowerPoint finishes, if you can't wait, it's not a problem. I'll pause the PowerPoint for a quick question. But if you're going to have a discussion, if it's just a quick question like you didn't hear something, whatever, the discussions, if we can hold off, that would be great. Um, if you need to reach out to me during the meeting, you can put something in the chat. Rivers is my girl for checking the chat, but I do not see her yet. But that's okay. You can go ahead and throw whatever you need in the chat and I'll get to it. The other thing I want to remind you of is the website. It's a fantastic source of information. It also has access to the workbook and the guidebook. You can see all the lessons coming up, all the lessons we've done. And in the event that you've deleted your homework, it's everything is on the website. So you don't have to wait till you can send me an email and ask me. Go right to the website. So if you have time at some point, just take a look at the website and it's really a good source of assistance. So when we work in the 12-step process, it it's it's implemented to bring about a profound spiritual awakening. And we don't want to be hijacked by replaying narratives that will lead us back into our own past and our old dysfunctional behaviors. So while the story helps identify the problem initially, it is the application of the 12 steps that produces our recovery. So this is just a little blurb as a reminder that we don't talk about the story here. We talk about the solution and the 12 steps and our experience of implementing the 12 steps into our situations. And if anyone is struggling with their particular addiction, I highly recommend you reach out to a sponsor, a therapist, or attend a meeting directed towards your particular addiction. Um, okay. So everybody just take a nice deep breath, relax, open your mind, set aside the outside world, and let go of all your preconceived ideas. Open up your mind, at least for the next hour and a half. Be willing to see things differently in order to live your life in the light. There will be things that come up that your brain's going to want to refuse to hear, but just live in the moment of acceptance and willingness so that it'll get in there and really make a tremendous difference in your life. This is the set aside prayer. So the set aside prayer is for the purpose of setting aside opening ourselves up for a new experience so that we can adopt this new way of living that keeps us not only sober or clean, but in touch with our higher power. So if you'd like to just read it along, say it along, you don't have to unmute. It's a great way to start any meeting or any time that you're going to sit down and do some of this work. It really opens up your whole being to the possibilities that are out there. So, God, please set aside everything that I think I know about myself, my brokenness, my spiritual path, and you for an open mind and a new experience with myself, my brokenness, my spiritual path, and especially you. So on page 49, Bill writes, "We who have traveled this dubious path beg you to lay aside prejudice, even against organized religion. We have learned that whatever the human fragilities of various faiths may be, those faiths have given purpose and direction to millions. People of faith have a logical idea of what life is all about." Bill held a nuanced view on religion, emphasizing personal spiritual experience over strict adherence to religious dogma. And while he believed in a higher power for recovery, he explicitly stated that this higher power could be interpreted in any way that resonated with the individual, including a non-religious or even atheistic perspective. Bill's approach was inclusive, allowing for a wide range of beliefs and practices within AA, and he actively worked to make the program accessible to those with varying religious and non-religious backgrounds, and even atheism. He was very careful, and you'll notice when you're reading that first 164 pages, Bill uses many different words to describe God, the higher power, whatever word that people use. And my recommendation is don't get stuck on any word I happen to use. It doesn't mean that's what I believe. I just like to put a variety out there to try to hit everybody who's out in the audience. It's really just a word. It's more about what your belief of the higher power is than the name that you give it. So when I talked about prayer and meditation last week, I also stated that it was important to do it on a daily basis in order to fill our vessels. If we use a cell phone as a metaphor, it may make a little more sense. I use my cell phone quite a bit. I use it for phone calls, email, it's my calendar, my morning alarm. I use it to check my social networking, my accounts, etc. You guys get it. You all do the same probably. And at the end of every day, if I'm conscious of what I'm doing, I can plug my phone in while I'm asleep. But I need to recharge it in order for my life to function as smoothly as it can with a little help from my phone, but it needs to stay charged. If I unplug my phone after my morning meditation, my phone will serve me pretty much all day long. But if I have a very difficult or pressing day, or I'm overly extended on a particular day, I might need to give my phone a quick charge or a boost so that I can continue my day with the aid of my handy dandy little phone. It would be very hard for me to operate or get through my day without my phone. The same goes for my spiritual guidance. Once I start in the morning, I will need to check my spiritual battery throughout the day to ensure that I will be able to stay connected. So step 10, which is what we're looking at this week, begins on page 84, and it says that we have entered the world of the spirit, and we will notice that at the end of the 9th step, there are several promises for us. Promises of a spiritual awakening and of the inevitable change that goes with that. We suddenly realize that our higher power is doing for us what we could not do for ourselves. And we have comfortably settled into the relationship with power, which defends against step one's powerlessness. For anyone that's new, we started with step 12 and we're going backwards to step 10. And then we're going to go to step one, and it'll come up later in the PowerPoint explaining why. So these promises, are they extravagant promises? Well, yes and no, but no, they're really not. Although these promises are at the end of the ninth step, Bill says they will always materialize if we work for them. So steps 1 through 9 are the program for recovery. Steps 10, 11, and 12 are our program for living. Steps 1 through 9 are the deflation of the ego in depth through establishing an effective relationship with a higher power. Although these promises are at the completion of the ninth step, Bill says they will materialize if we work for them. And I wonder, what is the work? What does that mean? What is Bill trying to tell us? What is it referring to? Well, in step 4, we take a searching and fearless moral inventory about our behaviors, internal motives, and our beliefs. Taking a searching and fearless moral inventory means a thorough self-assessment of one's past actions, behaviors, and character defects. It involves honestly examining both positive and negative aspects of one's life to understand how addiction and other issues have impacted ourselves and others. Searching implies a deep dive into one's past, while fearless means confronting uncomfortable truths without self-deception or avoidance. And when we do a personal inventory, it's not about our morals or our principles. Step 10 is about how we behave. We will be looking at our behaviors and our reactions that created our behaviors in the first place. Step 10 reads, continue to take personal inventory, and when we were wrong, promptly admitted it. So step 10 is an admission of our powerlessness to be able to do any better, even though we have every intention to do better. But we do not end up doing any better at first, and we continue to set right any new mistakes as we go along. Bill said we vigorously commence this way of living by using steps 10, 11, and 12, as this is our way of living. So this is the explanation behind the reversing of the steps in the beginning of the workshop. Herb K changed the order of exploring the steps after he realized that having done steps 10, 11, and 12 first gives step 1 so much more power and a deeper experience in our search for a power greater than ourselves, and a deeper experience with powerlessness as we have entered the world of the spirit. Herb wondered, where the hell have we been if we're just entering the world of the spirit, having done steps 1 through 9? And I have to agree with him. I think the 10, 11, 12 is a great setup before we have to make those first 3 steps, which is the declaration of what our beliefs are. So I think it's a great way to do it, but I'm sure it looks a little confusing when you see step 12 as your first step to study. So when we enter the world of the spirit, as we all will, that little dimmer switch goes up a notch at a time, starting from a very low number. Bill says it happens when we enter the world of the spirit. And in fact, things have been really dark. It is hard to see our surroundings. It can be frightening, but we gently turn that dial up 1 click at a time, and the light gets a tiny bit brighter, 1 tiny click. In this analogy of a dimmer switch being turned up a notch at a time refers to the gradual process of spiritual growth and awakening in recovery. The dimmer switch represents the slow, progressive unveiling of a spiritual life rather than an instantaneous information. So Bill often emphasized that this growth happens gradually, starting from a small amount of willingness and building over time. So it'd be unusual to have a spiritual enlightenment in the first moment of being in recovery, but anything's possible. But more often it takes time and it takes willingness and it takes some serious re-examining of what our beliefs are. So it's not a quick process, and nobody should feel like, oh, it should have happened by now. It happens exactly when it's supposed to. And Bill he uses the word recovered consistently throughout the big book. And it is really just a promise of hope when we hear it in the past tense, claiming the problem is put behind us. We will solve the problem of the body because we won't be using our process or substance addictions any longer. And we will also solve the problem of the mind because we will have no inclination to use. We're no longer obsessed. Bill also promises that we will be freed from physical addiction, but be careful because we are not cured. We have merely a daily reprieve contingent on the maintenance of our spiritual condition. And this is the model of the entire 12-step recovery process. So steps 1 through 9 are the rocket launch that Bill talks about in step 1. We get into our rocket, that's our important part, and we climb aboard, but once we do, the rocket takes us where the rocket's planning on going. We have minimal ability to manage or steer our rocket, but the rocket's going to take us where it is going to take us, which is into orbit around the light. This is the process of steps 1 through 9, the rocket launch. And this is what a 3-step launch looks like. Steps 1 through 3 is a relationship with our higher power, or the power, whatever you want to call it. Steps 4 through 7 is the relationship with ourself, and steps 8 and 9 is our relationship with others. So the 3-stage rocket launches us, and we are off into orbit around that light. And we can be in orbit as long as we do steps 10, 11, and 12 to make the needed adjustments on a daily basis. We are in the rocket, and there are buttons in there that allow me to stay in the trajectory as an antidote to the gravity of my unmanageability and eventually the gravity of my addictions. So let's take a look at addiction in step 10, which is a repeat of step 4, obstacles to power, on a much smaller scale. So first we identify and analyze self-centeredness, like I've talked about, and that Bill talks about on page 62. But what is the root of the problem? It's laid at the bottom of our foundation, and it's the root of the fruit, and the fruit of the root is anger. Bill viewed anger not just as a normal human emotion, but as a uniquely destructive poison for those of us in recovery. Bill distinguishes between the justified anger of others and the lethal nature of anger for the addict. If we were to live, we had to be free of anger. The grouch and the brainstorm were not for us. They may be the dubious luxury of normal men, but for alcoholics, these things are poison. That's from the big book, page 66. And while anger is a normal emotion, it can become problematic when it's expressed inappropriately or excessively, leading to the resentments. An instinct of survival, of fight, translates into the emotional reaction of anger and resentment. And then we have fear. Fear is a fundamental human emotion that evolved to help us avoid danger and protect ourselves and to protect human race. Bill viewed unhealthy sexual and relationship behaviors through the lens of selfishness, dishonesty, and insecurity, which he believed stemmed from a deeper spiritual and emotional malady. Bill emphasizes the need to move beyond selfishness in all aspects of life, including sex and relationships. When individuals are driven solely by instincts and desires for sex, security, and without concern for others, it can lead to unhealthy and destructive behaviors. The Big Book encourages examining actions for consideration and whether was a lack of respect for another person's boundaries and comfort levels in sexual and relationship interactions. While Bill famously struggled with his own compulsive womanizing and sexual infidelities, which lasted long after he achieved sobriety from alcohol, his written teachings and personal reflections indicate at times a contradictory desire for a sane and sound ideal in sex and relationships. I'm pretty sure if Bill were alive today, I think he would recognize that he transferred one addiction for another. The sexual behaviors became a compulsion to feel normal or get a rush once the alcohol was replaced. So this balance that needs addressing, according to step 4, helps us understand our biological model from flight, fight, and freeze, which camouflage and hide the dishonesty mechanism needed for survival and keeping our secrets. These concepts are relevant for most people, but not as prominent in Bill's time. This is important to know because step 10 is built on this. So the first 9 steps are for the deflation of the ego at depth. Eckhart Tolle is a brilliant author. He wrote a book called A New Earth. And in that, he wrote, an ego that wants something from another, and what ego doesn't, will usually play some kind of role to get its needs met, be they material gain, a sense of power, superiority, or specialness, or some kind of gratification, be it physical or psychological. Usually, people are completely unaware of the roles they play, but they are those roles. Some roles are subtle, others are blatantly obvious, except to the person playing it. Some roles are designed simply to get attention from others. The ego thrives on others' attention, such as recognition, praise, admiration, or just to be noticed in some way, to have its existence acknowledged. Deflation of the ego is the point of step 10. The 12-step process is about waking up to the truth, which, as the saying goes, it will set us free. And in fact, this is exactly what happens. Even though the truth may seem frightening and I would prefer my denial over having to deal with my life, the freedom from all the chaos and suffering is removed by my awakening. This process is about waking up, so let's take a look at our beliefs that surround our self-induced comas. When we take a look at our beliefs, we can see that they come in different colors. And if we change our lenses, we experience life through those new lenses. I have defined them, and the glasses work for me through my will in order to convince myself that the world that I look at through my lenses makes me a victim of the world I'm seeing. If I look through my blue lenses, I am going to see blue everywhere. To make it real, let's say I have an obsession with getting attention through being a victim. I put my glasses on, and everyone I encounter is victimizing me, and I walk around feeling defeated and depressed with my blue glasses on. Let's say I'm wearing my yellow glasses. Again, I will see yellow where I am looking, or to make it more personal, maybe I have a jealousy problem, and everywhere I look, I see my envy towards others. And when I put my pink glasses on, I see pink. I won't know that is what I am seeing because it is the only thing I can see, because it is my distorted lenses through which I look. The problem is most of our lenses are distortions of our skewed motives, and therefore we see reality in that same distorted way. I think it was Chuck C. developed the whole theory behind the color of your glasses. If anybody listens to Chuck C., he's one of the older people from the program. So our lenses are distorted and we are asleep in our lives. We are in denial and living our lives based on being asleep, detached from our real lives. The reality of ourselves, the reality of other people, and the reality of reality itself and of the world. It's distorted, but we don't know it's distorted because it is the only thing that we can see because we are looking through our customized distorted lenses. We don't see the lens through which we are looking as the actual problem. Step 4 begins to identify the lenses and the distortions of our beliefs and the distortion of our motives. And therefore, the distortions of our emotions. In the 12 and 12, there's a formula that is extremely impactful as a tool of emotional sobriety. It's called a spiritual axiom. And it says, whenever I am disturbed, there is something wrong with me. The first time I heard this idea, I was, well, frankly, shocked and offended, probably a little pissed off even. How absurd that this could be true when, well, they haven't met my sister-in-law, or they don't know how much something cost me, or they don't know my ex-husband and how much of a narcissist he was. And I believe I'm disturbed because of them. They are doing it to me, and I am totally invested in this insanity. I would say, how can they not see this? It is so obvious. Who is at fault? And it is not me. How can this be mistaken? And I could justify my bad behaviors by stating it, if only to myself. If you had these people in your life, you would use like me. And if you had my circumstances, you would use some more like me. And if you had my childhood, you would totally use all the time. When I embrace this reality as being true, that I am disturbed because of me and my distorted thoughts and emotions, my life made another dramatic change. I would put the old lenses on every day and wear them with self-righteousness. And I can't lie, on some days for some events, I sometimes can still try to deny whether it is true. I don't have a part in my resentments. I don't have a part in my anger. I don't have a part in my being disturbed, because the responsibility is 100% mine. There are no parts. It's all mine. So I take responsibility for my feelings and thoughts because nobody can make me do anything without my consent. My reactions to people, places, and things are my responsibility. They are mine. I own them. I didn't know until I knew, and then I couldn't deny that it was true. It changed me permanently upon realizing how much was lost of my time, energy, relationships due to my inaccurate assumption that it was coming from outside of me. I desperately blamed everyone but myself. It was a hard pill to swallow, but in the end, it was extremely empowering. Bill's message is that achieving emotional sobriety requires us to stop blaming others for our emotional state. Instead, we take responsibility for our own reactions, attitudes, and recovery. When we are willing to accept that we control our own internal responses, we then gain the freedom to break cycles of self-pity, resentment, and dependency. And the big book says, continue to watch for selfishness, resentment, dishonesty, and fear. We have to be vigilant when these crop up. And it's not an if, it's a when, because we never transcend our humanity or our unmanageability. So they can always crop up, even when we think we're 100% recovered. Unmanageability is not only connected to addiction, it is connected to human nature. I can be freed from my addiction, but I am never going to be freed from my human nature. I will never transcend my humanity. I will always have things to deal with, and when I do, I have 3 survival mechanisms that might kick in. Fight, flight, and freeze. When these are translated into emotional mechanisms, they translate into misbehavior, and the root cause is my selfishness. My will is deficient, but my will always choose me. And what that statement means is it's based on Bill's writings. When he spoke about my will or self-will, choosing himself, he meant that an alcoholic's ego or an addict's ego, thinking and desire for control, if left unchecked, will always default to selfishness, dishonesty, fear, and eventually a return to using or misery. And I don't have enough power to turn that around. And that is why in step 3, we will make the commitment to turn, and we will turn to be in alignment with reality. To be in alignment with the Creator, in alignment with the power, is where we lean into the light and we turn our will and life over to the care of our higher power as we understand whatever that concept is for us. So the 12-step GPS analogy views recovery as a guided journey where a higher power acts as the navigation system. And how it works is you input a destination, which is whatever you desire. You listen for the turn-by-turn guidance, one day at a time, and utilize recalculating, meaning steps 10 through 12, to get back on track without judgment after detours, aka mistakes. You have to actively set your destination to sobriety/recovery, admitting you cannot reach it alone, and trust the system, meaning your higher power, to provide the route. The GPS doesn't show the whole journey, only the next turn. Actionable steps like taking an inventory and making amends are specific maneuvers designed to move you forward, often when you cannot see the end of your journey. When you miss a turn, which is relapse, or you've made a mistake or use a character defect, the GPS does not shame you or stop working. It simply says recalculating. And even though that word drives me nuts, it really doesn't have an effect. So steps 10 through 12 act as a daily check-in to reroute you immediately, treating errors as part of the path of connection, not an end to the journey. And the GPS only provides directions when you are in motion. Similarly, You must take daily action by working the steps to receive guidance from your guidance protective system, aka your higher power. This is what we are doing with step 10. We are listening for directions from our higher power. So when I am disturbed, I pause. I need to pause because I need to acknowledge and recognize that the fact is, I am the one that is disturbed, not the world around me, and I am responsible for my thoughts and emotions. Bill defines disturbed to mean that an addict is experiencing a loss of inner peace, emotional stability, or serenity, typically caused by a reaction to people, places, or situations. So when I'm disturbed and I've paused, it's time to pray. I talk to my higher power and I listen for that small whispering voice to guide me back into my reality. Then Bill instructs that we discuss it with someone as soon as we possibly can. Notice that Bill said, first we ask God, which is the code for prayer in the big book. When Bill says ask God, he means go and pray. Bill says we discuss it with someone as soon as possible and not to wait to do a 10th step that night. We don't do step 10s in writing. It's a quick shot. The 12 and 12 gives us a repetitive confirmation of the exact nature of our step 10 tool. Bill says it's a spot check inventory, but what does that mean? It means that when I am disturbed, right there, right then, on the spot, I do step 10 on the spot about what's going on. It might sound something like this. My higher power, I have been overly controlling again, and it was my husband. So I need to talk to him about it. And he says to me, oh, yeah, you were clearly trying to control me. And he knows my struggles with control, and I'm trying to let go more. And he says, I get it. You've been in compromising relationships and belt trap, whatever. But I was trying not to do that to you. So he was, trying to be good. And it's such a beautiful freedom to be a human being who makes mistakes and has the freedom to correct them, which is what the step 10 is about. It's not about retribution or punishment. It's about, hey, I made a mistake. I'm going to make an amends and I'm going to move on. End of discussion. That way we avoid having resentments. And then it might be time to make an amends in order to release it. So I'm working on my behavior, but I try to balance the justice scale. So I make an amends as quickly as possible, as soon as I can catch it when I have caused harm. I'll say, okay, you know what? I know what I just did, and I apologize. It's an old behavior. Please accept my apology. And it's really great if you do it right away because it's put right behind you right away. It's wonderful. Don't wait. Make your amends and get on with the next thing. And the last action is to help someone in any way that you can. Bill doesn't technically say to go help somebody. He says we resolutely turn our thoughts to someone we can help. And Bill was a pretty decent therapist from a common sense standpoint, and he knew, in fact, that we are beginning to think about other people at this point. It was in this process that Herb stopped using the word service for step 12 and replaced the word service with the word help. He felt using help would be much simpler because it has grit in it. You may get frustrated and your hands might get dirty, your time will be abused, and you will get tired if you are truly being helpful. And the whole service word made it sound like you had to go out and do something like volunteer at a hospital or something. It's not that complicated. Just help in whatever way you can. Maybe it's picking something up off the floor for somebody that didn't realize they dropped it. That's help. It makes a huge difference in our lives. So we need some love and tolerance of ourselves and others. That's our code. My attitude and my behavior are in check. Here's the promise with regard to the first step. Bill says, we have ceased fighting anyone or anything, including our addiction, for sanity will have returned. Step 2 says, restored to sanity. There is no implying about psychiatric and psychological sanity, and we will look at it deeply when we look at the problem of the mind. But on page 37, Bill defines sanity, which means that we are vulnerable to the obsessions. Not only has the addiction use stopped, but we are placed in a position of neutrality. Therefore, the inclination to use our addictions has been removed. That is what he is saying here when he says that we are recovered. And with step 10, 11, and 12, we gain a spiritual shield by living in the light, in orbit around the light, because we make adjustments on a daily basis. When we are disturbed, we apply step 10 so that we stay in alignment in orbit around the light. In step 11, we get guidance as to how to manage staying in orbit around the light, not only with the knowledge, but also with the power to do so. In step 12, we operate on principles of universal, spiritual, and human principles that allow us to stay in orbit by helping somebody else, which is one of the principles of human behavior. If you want to be in the light and not the darkness, you have to have a relationship with the light, and then you spread that light. You're not only a channel of light yourself, but the light in you shines through to other people. I heard this addiction problem, I don't know, maybe 5 or 6 years ago, and I could not figure out what it was saying. And Bill conveys to us that the gifts and the freedom from this work is disproportionately larger than our contribution to the work, and that has been totally my experience. So we don't fight it because we have been placed in a position of neutrality. Therefore, we are safe and protected. We don't do this correct formula 1 + 1 = 2. Nope. We complete steps 1 through 9, which is when 1 + 1 will equal 5. And it will stay this way as long as we continue to stay spiritually connected. So that's the basis of this equation. We put in 1 part, our higher power puts in 1 part, and we get 5 back. That's how immense and amazing it is. And what does a daily reprieve mean? A daily reprieve in recovery means avoiding a relapse for 1 day, contingent on maintaining a healthy spiritual condition. This principle, derived from page 85 of the Big Book, indicates that sobriety is not a permanent cure, but a daily gift maintained through spiritual practices, action, and reliance on a higher power. Whose vision is this? Most people would say it is God's vision, but no, that's not the answer. We don't know what God's vision is, which is why Bill is introducing us to the practice of meditating in the morning. I want to know what I'm being asked to do today and who I am being asked to be. It is my vision of God's will, my vision of reality, and my reality is evolving and manifesting. With my free will, I get to choose whether to be in alignment with my higher power's will and do thy will be done. So I have willpower and I have free will, but not when it comes to addiction. Then I have no choice. When I lose control because my body is defective, it's highly reactive, addictive, and allergic. When I don't engage and I make a commitment to not get involved with things where I don't belong, I'm reminded that my mind is defective and vulnerable to my obsessions. When I start to use, I have no choice. My addiction is in control now. If I try to use on my own power, my life will become more unmanageable, and my willpower is just as defective and deficient with regard to my life as it is with regard to my addiction. My conclusion is I'm doomed. Bill even says that we feel a sense of doom and hopelessness. Then in step 2, he asks us to make a decision. How ironic is that? In step 2, chapter 4, he asks us to make a decision after he has just pummeled us with the experience that we don't have the ability to make a decision, that we don't have a choice. Yet, in step 1, we don't have a decision to make over our addiction, and we don't have a decision over managing our lives. But in step 2, he says, we do have a decision to make. And it's on page 53. And this decision Bill will ask us to make is not about our addiction or life, but about God or no God. On page 53, he says, God either is or he isn't. What is our choice to be? What is your choice? This is my favorite part of the entire book. Here is the challenge of my limited power over my willpower, which is singularly needed to choose whether there is a God or choose that there is no God. That is what Bill tells us in reference to the traditions, that we don't need any laws or regulations because there are only two disciplines. One is God and the other is addictions. You are either grasping for one or you're grasping for the other. They cannot live simultaneously together. So this is the story of the two wolves. It's one of my favorite stories. It's a tremendous analogy for me along my path when dealing with some tremendous amounts of fear and other emotions. So an old Cherokee Indian chief was teaching his grandson about life. A fight is going on inside of me, he told the young boy, a fight between two wolves. One is evil, full of anger, resentment, despair, greed, self-pity, and false pride. The other is good, full of joy, peace, love, humility, kindness, and faith. This same fight is going on inside of you, grandson, inside of every other person on the face of this earth. The grandson ponders this for a moment and then asks, well, grandfather, which wolf will win the fight? The old man smiled and simply said, whichever one you feed. The two wolves represent faith, the good, positive, white life wolf, and fear, or ego, the bad/negative dark wolf. I need to connect to my faith on a daily basis to keep me from the big, bad, dark, enticing wolf. There are only two choices, two disciplines in the 12-step program of recovery. You're either going for one or you're going for the other, the dark side or the light side. There is no middle ground. The dimmer switch is going up or the dimmer switch is going down. It's very black and white, no pun intended. And in regards to that dimmer switch, I need to stay pressed up against it gently, as it is wired to go down automatically. So I need to stay diligent and awake. And when I do, the results will be in contrast to resentment. I will experience forgiveness, and in releasing the offenders, I am also released from the bondage of resentment. I will experience trust instead of fear. My faith is strong in my higher power, but I struggle with trust, often trusting when it was not in my best interest. Just a note on this, while Bill emphasized trust, he did not advocate for blind trust. According to the AA Daily Reflections, he suggested that one should assess the capacity for harm as well as the capability for good in every person that we would trust. In his writings on emotional sobriety, Bill connects trust with healthy emotional maturity, arguing that at the root of most unhappiness is some unhealthy dependency and its consequent unhealthy demand. He believed that trusting in a higher power and in the process of recovery allows individuals to stop demanding that others satisfy their every need. And I will experience honesty instead of dishonesty, and therefore my life is in the flow of reality. Honesty is reality, and staying honest keeps the flow going. We can feel it and stay there as long as we practice our practice. And I will experience love in the sense of altruism, which is the unselfish concern for other people. Doing things simply out of a desire to help, not because we feel obligated to do so out of duty, loyalty, or religious reasons. Instead, it involves acting purely out of concern for the well-being of other people, not to be confused with people pleasing. People pleasing is a manipulative, controlling act. It's a whole other story. That's not what we're talking about here. And this all adds up to emotional maturity, emotional sobriety, emotional freedom. This is our rite of passage to transcend being human. It is optimal living, free from the bondage of our feelings and thoughts that we have allowed to imprison us in the past. On page 85, Bill says, "How can I best serve thee? Thy will, not mine, be done." These are thoughts which must go with us constantly. We can exercise our willpower along this line all we wish. It is the proper use of our will. And these thoughts are designed to be used when agitated or doubtful, providing an immediate pause to ask for the right thought or action rather than reacting out of fear or anger. And how can we be in the flow of reality? We can start with the understanding that reality just is. We don't take it personally because it isn't about us. Reality is not negotiable. You can't change it, you can only accept it. It's not fair or unfair, it's completely neutral. All the meaning reality has, we have put onto it by choice, often without even an awareness of that. It is what it is. It is just real. There's no bargaining, no pleading. It won't change. It can't change. It has already happened. The outcome is final. This procession is the whole point of step 10, to live in serenity, in the flow, in harmony with what is, and to be content in the knowledge of reality in the flow that contains me. And this doesn't exempt us from life having its ups and downs. Life always will be unpredictable. That is the nature of life. Our new way of life gives us the shock absorbers to handle the road when it gets full of potholes, emotionally and spiritually, that we fall into. And it happens to work very well with our GPS. We can adjust to reality and be in the flow to walk the path guided and supported. Here is my choice. God or no God, shock absorbers or not. I choose to walk in reality. I don't fight what is. My attitude is filled with willingness, acceptance, and gratitude. And Bill calls this the proper use of the will when we carefully follow his directions and stay in the flow, which is actually discussed in the big book. We will become God consciousness. That is the point of step 11. We saw that when we discussed spiritual awakening and spiritual experiences. There's a great line in there that says, awareness of the presence of God is the essence of a spiritual experience, with the emphasis on awareness, not a feeling, not a thought or knowledge, but awareness. The awareness requires no work, no great discovery, just the desire to connect and to be aware. Even when we can't feel the presence, we trust it is still there. And often it starts out subtle. Then, as we expand our minds and ideas, we embrace this new way of life. And the more we weave this attitude into our lives, the more evident the presence becomes. Not because the presence has changed, but because we have changed. We are slowly opening up to the concept of power. So, with our step 10 inventory, we clear the channel in the morning and on the spot. We are the channel, the vessel. A clearing of the channel with the 10-step spot check done is the antidote to the darkness, to the relapse, to the unmanageability. We are continuously cleaning out the obstacles in us through recognizing those things that disturb us and taking responsibility for our feelings and thoughts without blaming others. In step 11, we fill the channel with prayer and meditation. And we bring in the light, the energy, and the grace, and it gives us the awareness of the Holy Spirit, or whatever your choice is, and that has always been there, and this awareness makes it readily available to us. And finally, in step 12, when my channel is filled, it spills over. I am not the light, but I am the container. And the brighter my container becomes, the more I can shine it on the path that I walk on. And others can join me in this light as we walk towards freedom together. I clear the channel to enable it to be filled, and then I can share it with those around me so that they can have the same opportunity to also become free. And that is the end of the PowerPoint. There we go. So anybody that has any questions or anything about the PowerPoint that you might have a question about, please feel free to speak up, raise your hand. If there's anyone in the group that would like to speak but does not like to be recorded, I can pause the recording for you. Just let me know ahead of time that that's what you're going to do. Otherwise, it is obviously being recorded. There are no faces on the video. So I hope people feel comfortable.
I just got to say that I love the PowerPoint, but I love the fact that I am able to go over the PowerPoint afterwards. Like I wait usually about 5 days or 4 or 5 days, and then I go over the PowerPoint again and usually stop it to write things down because I find that reinforcing my memory with a go over of the PowerPoint is really good and it actually sinks in a lot better. And that's just the way my memory works. I used to do that in as best I could back in like the 70s and 80s in college. I didn't have a way of doing that with, you know, there was no way to do that. But I used to go over my notes as best I could again and again and again and fill in the gaps. But doing it this way now, with the, stopping and going with the video of the PowerPoint is just really great because it just plugs it in.
There's a lot there. There's a
Yeah.
lot there. And, when
But
you're
there's basic
listening,
concepts.
yeah. And when you're listening, if you're trying to write everything down, you're going to miss stuff. So it's great that
Right.
you listen, then you watch it to reinforce it, and you can stop it, pause it, start it up again, and take whatever notes you need to
Yeah.
take. And then also, I don't know if everybody realizes, I don't know when people were here, but on my website, there's a whole guidebook where you can go in, and a lot of the PowerPoints are right in the guidebook to match up if you're interested. Not all of them, because there's a lot of them, but all right. All right. Go ahead, Anita.
Oh, just some thoughts, just some thoughts. You talk about when I'm disturbed, there's something wrong with me. And it sounds like that's really, I mean, if you can take that in deflation of the ego. And also this, deflation of the ego is just a little bit muddy for me to grasp onto it. So when I looked at the list and I'm asking the question, if um, you can get a handle on resentments, fears, selfishness, and dishonesty, is that getting you towards deflation of the ego?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes, that is exactly what the ego is made up of. An
Oh,
ego is a false identity that we attach to that is not based in reality.
oh,
So that's why it's important to deflate the ego because it's not who we really are.
ah,
Yeah,
okay.
it's a mask. It's like a mask that we wear. Um, so when we deflate the ego, we have to eliminate those four categories because that's what feeds it. All those things feed into the ego. And when people are thinking about it, they're thinking like somebody with a big ego, like the guy that's looking in the mirror. It's not like that. The ego is the part of a human's makeup that basically fights against a higher power. Some people even refer to the ego as the devil.
Oh,
Um, Not that I believe in the devil, but some people do put them together. Um, so the ego, it's just not based in reality. It's not a real thing, but we walk around like it is, and we depend on our egos to get us through each different thing in our day. But at some point, the ego fails, which of course it would. And a lot of people replace the ego with their addictions, and they use an addiction instead of the ego. So the ego
yeah,
is
I
definitely
wondered how
something,
that tied in too.
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. So the ego is, um, and we have to remember that when Bill wrote the big book, he was talking about alcoholics, and alcoholics, and this is not to offend anyone that might be an alcoholic, but alcoholics are notoriously self-centered and they're very narcissistic because they're completely consumed by their addiction. And the addiction takes over everything within them. So the ego wins out by destruction, basically. And so Bill was very conscious of that ego because he's a recovering alcoholic and he's also, I believe, a sex addict. So, um, you have to look at that ego. It has to be exercised almost. It's the part of yourself that, like when something goes wrong, let's say in your vicinity, you assume it's your fault or it came because of you for some reason. You're that so self-centered on yourself. Your ego's so big, it thinks everything around it is happening because of you. And eventually that leads to a lot of problems. Like one instance is people who take everything personally. They think everything's about them. That's the ego. And that ego really has no place in our lives in recovery. But it gets us through life. It gets us through whatever's going on, and it gets us to a place we can actually deal with what's going on, but the ego has to be diminished in order to do that.
Yeah. Thank you.
You're welcome. Go ahead, Michelle.
I really love this idea of the GPS.
Yeah.
I was at this retreat last week and I live in California and we were in Connecticut, somewhere in the middle of nowhere, and we couldn't get the GPS signal. I wasn't driving, but I would have, if I was driving and in charge, I would have been petrified. And this woman stayed really calm and she said, let's go back the way we came until we can get this signal again. And I just love this, that I especially like the idea that the GPS, when I miss a turn, which I do regularly, the GPS doesn't shout at me, "You're so stupid, you're a worthless piece of garbage." It just says recalculating. And so
Right.
many times when I make a mistake, I say to myself, "Oh my God, you're so stupid, whatever." And what a waste of time that is, because here's this electronic thing that doesn't judge me. And I get there, and like you said, the goal is recovery, and it's the root, turning the root over to God, even when I can't see the whole root. Because when it's on my phone, I can't see the whole thing. I just got to listen for turn by turn. And
Yep.
I love this analogy. I think it's just it's and step 10 is listening for directions from God. And I
Yes.
just think this is great. I probably heard it a million times, but I don't remember. But anyway, I love that. I love the
Yep.
GPS.
Well, you know what? You just had that experience with the GPS, so it really solidified the whole story for you. And
Right.
sometimes it takes a little extra to get there.
Right. And how reliant we are on things that, I was talking to somebody about Waymos, the cars that don't have any drivers. And
Mm.
then they had an instance where all the power went out in the city somewhere, and all these Waymos were clustered and whatever. They have to have the
Oh,
power or they can't get anywhere. They have to have the power. And that's what we're looking for, is the power from God, or we can't get anywhere. We can't get to recovery. So I love that.
exactly. Thank you, Rochelle. Go ahead, Susan.
Uh, Hi, going back to ego, could we say a simple, like a simple way of saying it is basically all our coping mechanisms are our ego?
I don't think I can say that
No?
because some coping mechanisms are are built in because of a real need, whereas the ego is not a need, it's a want.
Okay.
So a lot of our mechanisms that we built in when we were in a place where we weren't safe, um, there's probably a part of us that being human wants to survive, but it wouldn't be an ego. It would be that drive to survive, period.
Hmm.
The ego, I think if you look at it as your lower self, that might help because we have a higher self, which is connected to the higher power, and then we have the lower self, which is connected to all the stuff that just doesn't work out in life. But we get attached to it.
And I guess maybe where I'm coming from with that coping mechanisms is like, I mean, that's what addiction ultimately is. It's something that we do until it doesn't work for us anymore, right?
Well, we
And
do continue to do it even when it doesn't work for us.
right,
Yeah,
right. And so that's
that's
kind of what we
addictions are.
root out, kind of what we root out. Like it's like this stuff isn't working. Now we have to be willing to let it go.
Mhm.
So, okay,
Yeah, we do have to be willing, but that doesn't mean that we will.
for sure.
We, especially if we're talking about a coping mechanism that we're utilizing and we're still feeling unsafe, we haven't really connected strongly with our higher power, we're going to be a little more reluctant to give up that protective system, even though it's on the negative side. Because,
But even though we're handing like I mean we're admitting our powerlessness. So our coping mechanisms are our power.
our coping mechanisms are our power. I don't know. I think that's probably an individual question for each person to see if they do use it that way. Um,
Mm.
I don't think, in my own experience, when I use coping mechanisms, it was to survive, not to thrive or to become a better person or any of those other things. It was basically to stay alive.
And in our minds, like in a child's mind in particular,
Hmm.
like it is a survival. Like it's and like
It can be as an adult. If you're in an abusive relationship and you are in a place where you're not capable of removing yourself from the situation, you're going to still need coping mechanisms to survive as an adult. It's
Hmm.
not just a child that needs to survive those things.
Well,
mean,
like a lot of it's picked up as children, and that's where we carry them on into adulthood. And then this is where, later in life, we're like, this isn't working anymore. Like it's gotten out of control.
right,
And
right.
those are the things that we need to get rid of.
Hmm. But because we've needed them in our lives to survive, we don't just let go of them that easily.
Well, no.
Yeah, it's a little bit difficult. And what I recommend to people is put your higher power in place before you try to get to a place
Well,
where you can,
yeah. And I guess knowing that fact,
yeah.
that's what's going to happen. I'm just, I was just kind of like connecting the dots to my coping mechanisms, I guess.
Mhm. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. I mean, maybe somebody could take their coping mechanisms into an egoic state of mind. Like, I don't know, maybe for instance, like a damsel in distress kind of situation.
Hmm.
Somebody that likes to play the victim and needs to be rescued and
Yeah.
all of that, type of behavior. So I could see it
And then,
that way too.
so then it would be like manipulation and all those things.
Yeah, because it's ego driven.
Yeah.
The
Yeah.
ego wants to win.
Yeah.
So if we're talking about like a person who's looking for attention because they're a victim, they're going to want to win at any price.
Sure.
They're going to put into it whatever they have to because that's their vicarious thrill. That's their hit. That's the
Right.
addiction. That's the magnetism of it
Hmm.
because it gives them that hit that they feel a certain sense of that ego. They think the ego is what they really are, and that's where they're going to live. But you can't live in an ego.
Yeah. Okay. That
Yeah,
answers
yeah,
the
that's
question.
the
That
other.
answered it for me.
That's the other side of taking everything personally, and the other side of thinking that everything is that every situation is because of them.
Hmm.
The
Yeah,
narcissism,
yeah.
it's
The
all surrounding the same thing.
the ego stands in the middle, and everybody spins around them.
That's
And
right.
then they say that about an alcoholic home. The alcoholic stands in the middle of the house, and everybody runs around them trying to cope and manage and do all those things. And he's doing the alcoholic just stands there drinking.
It's not just about alcoholics. I
No,
mean,
it's all
sadly,
addiction.
I see it a little bit in myself too.
Exactly.
I'm a little bit of a narcissist, and I'm gonna try as in my old age to reduce the narcissism because I've seen it, and sadly, I've been a little bit of a manipulator in my life,
Yep.
and I wish I could undo some of the things that I've done because I've tried to be a manipulator. Not consciously, but it's because my ego's been running crazy.
Exactly. Exactly. I can listen to this again.
Yeah, because this
Yeah.
stuff, yeah, this stuff I think it's kind of like on topic. So, or I mean, on the topic of the assignment, like, so yeah, I'm not cured. I thought that was really interesting because, like, when I looked it up, this means the condition is arrested but not removed. In other words, like the addiction is in stasis, and I was really sort of like thinking about that because, like, that's an easier ask for me to ask my God, just help me today. And I didn't think about that until like I was doing the assignment. Like instead of like just take it away forever, which I find challenging, can you take it away for today? And that might make it easier in the future just dealing with this thing that I feel like sometimes is drowning me in and, in terms of my lifestyle around money. And just the idea like of the daily reprieve, also the ability which is continuation of that, to stop the addiction once a day. And I can't stop it by myself, but I can ask God to stop it. And so that was another really good thing that I kept reminding, because a lot of times, even though I am a believer, I can get into my mind and be like, I got to sort it out, and I don't really have to sort it out at all. I really don't have to sort it out.
And that,
Spots,
Mark,
yeah,
is
go ahead.
that's a great example of the ego. I just wanted to interject that in there, but keep going.
So like the 10 steps, I do the 10 steps on a regular basis, and usually like I'll do like resentments and send them to people, but I need to look at more like at fears. And so I think there is like, like I wrote down stuff like, yes, there was a long period of reconstruction ahead, and then I was reminded that I need to take the lead, that the people, for example, I mentioned in the part off script, they're not going to change. I got to take the lead and let whoever do whatever they're going to do. They're going to do whatever they're going to do, and I have to take the lead because I'm the one who's saying that I'm in recovery. And then it continues on like on 83, which is actually before what we were asked to do, but their defects may be glaring. And their defects are glaring, but that's none of my business, unfortunately. That's really
Exactly.
that's none of my business.
Yeah.
And then continue on. There may be some wrongs I can never fully right. Like I may not be able to. I can't go back into the past. I did what I did,
Yeah.
and just kind of winding down what I'm saying. Like as God's people, I can stand on my feet. So that's something like interesting that's come up. Like I'm not really like I'm not destined to lay down on the ground. Um, and then like I think kind of like winding down is like so I've entered the world of the spirit really, um as long as I continue to do the spot checking. And then the interesting thing that sometimes I forget is when these crop up. Like it mentions those different defects like resentment, jealousy, envy, other things, but it says like not that they're never going to crop up, but they will crop up, which is a reminder that I am going to get upset. I am going to get fearful. I am going to get all these different things. Um, and just more so like some of this stuff about like I'll lose interest in selfish things, and it kind of hit me, and I had never thought about it in terms of the specific addiction that I'm looking at here, and it was like this is really self-centered, but it hit me like in a much deeper way than the last time we did it. I was like, wow, I didn't really. I always kind of thought like I was hurting myself or something like that, but the idea that this particular addiction, like I'm minimizing myself, making myself small, which is a way to hold on, and it's self-centered. There's no way I can fight that. And I could go on and on and on, but a lot of that stuff really hit me in a much deeper way, and I'll leave it there. Thanks.
You know what, Mark, that's great to hear because it confirms what I say, which is that we peel an onion when we do this work. And, a lot of times we'll think, oh, well, I'm done and I've done this and I've done that, but then something else comes up. Because as we progress and we learn more information and we get closer to our higher power and we get closer to our true selves, we're seeing life in a different way. Therefore, we're seeing new issues and new things that come up. So, what you're doing is you're spot on, absolutely spot on with how you're approaching it. And the thing about the cured thing is cured means if we were cured of our addiction, it would mean that we could go out and we could do whatever we were doing before, and there would be no after effect. We can never do that again. Once a cucumber becomes a pickle, it never goes back to being a cucumber. And that's what the cured on a daily basis means. And as people with addiction issues, we can't do more than one day at a time. We are just not suited for more than one day at a time. We have a mind and we have a will that's defective. So we can contain it in that one day, and that's where it's manageable. And I will tell everyone, and I'm going to be totally honest about this. Sometimes I forget to do my spot checks during the day. I'm not going to lie, I do. And I'll know that I do. And when I'm at the end of my day, I will take time and go over my day and see if there was stuff that I didn't do. So, I'm not going to sit down and do a written 10th step that looks like a fourth step. It's totally not that. But it is a conscious looking at myself in my day so that I can learn more about me in my day and my connection to my higher power. So I might forget to do it because I'm having a very busy day or whatever. But at the end of the night, I'm still going to go over it because I want to know where I'm at. I want to know how I'm doing. And the best way to do that for me is a review of my day. I mean, sometimes, yeah, the step 10 is right there because I blatantly have screwed up and that's obvious. But sometimes it's the little stuff and I'll, be sitting in my meditation and I'll be thinking, boy, I said something that now that I'm thinking about it, it wasn't so great. And that's how I do my 10th step. So it doesn't have to be on the spot. If you forget, do it at the end of the night. Um, my only response to that would be that there are some things in this world that the 12 steps doesn't cover. And I'm not sure what Davo is. I've never heard of it. But there are some things that require medication. There are things that require therapy. Sometimes you need a treatment center, um, a different type of meeting. There's a lot of things that can be done. But when it gets to the more severe stuff, a 12-step program is a self-help type of program. Um, so if something becomes serious enough, I would I would say, and I've had to say this to people, you need to see a professional. There are times when a professional is what's called for. It's just what is. It doesn't mean we have to give up the 12-step part of everything. It just means we need a little more than just a 12-step. Go ahead, Mark.
Yeah, I just want to echo what was put in the chat. I mean, like a lot of the stuff is addressed by hardcore work in ACA, in my experience, because really, when I started doing the work there, I was able to really see some of the triangulation patterns in my family of origin. So it already does exist. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, and it's a matter of degree. Um, if you can go to a 12-step meeting and you can get relief and you can get recovery and you can get improvement, absolutely. If you're in these places and you're not getting what you need to go somewhere else. Absolutely. And like I said, you don't have to give up the 12-step part, but you need to add something professional with it. Go ahead, Rochelle.
I think it's echoing the same thing. You know, I've had cancer twice, and I've had people say things to me, and I just want to scream. When you walk the path that I've walked, then you can. In other words, it's not that they're not thought kind; it's just that they don't have the experience. And when I was widowed, it was the same thing. And so I found for me, adding a cancer support group, adding a widow support group, and sometimes the questions I have are just day to day life questions that it's not about addiction. It's not about, I just want to talk to people who get it, who understand what I'm going through. Because like I said to somebody, I never thought about cancer until the day the doctor said you have cancer. And then I needed to be in a group where I could ask those kinds of questions. And I think 12 step goes right along with it. I mean, I just think there's nothing like this 12 step programs, but sometimes you need something that's more specific for your situation, for your path, whatever
Yeah.
that path is.
And I think I've heard in meetings, I've heard somewhere, you wouldn't go to church for a broken leg.
Right,
Maybe God can make you feel better about the broken leg or whatever, but you have to go to an orthopedic surgeon for a broken bone. You don't go
right.
to a church meeting. So that kind of covers it, but it's like we've said, it's depends on the degree, and it depends on if the 12-step work is helping. If you're finding you're in a meeting and all you just keep talking about the same thing over and over again, it's clearly not getting
Well,
addressed.
I'm sorry to interrupt. It's just about what is said throughout all the 12-step writings. You take the world as it comes. God is with you and will affect the way that you perceive the world, but God can't change the world. And that's what got me to change my perception about what my parents used to say to me about the Holocaust, which is the reason why they didn't believe in God, which,
Yeah.
we don't believe in God because how could God let the Holocaust occur? And then somebody said to me, which helped me change my view a little bit, was God didn't change the way that Nazism was or the way that the world was, but God changes the way that you perceive or the way that you view the world, and it affects your spirituality about it. So that changed the way that I saw it a little bit. And that's the whole thing. It's not going to change the way that your parents were or the way that anything was, but it can only change the way that you perceive it. And if you have a broken leg, you're going to have to go to an orthopedist.
Exactly. But like I said, I'm not going to pray to God to remove my diabetes. I'm going to take my diabetes shot. It's just it's common sense sometimes, but it's just knowing where you need to be to get the help that you need, and that's not always clear.
You
So,
know, I've become a great appreciator of Facebook groups. I have you can almost not come up with an issue where there isn't a group. I fractured my foot, and there was something called the Lisfranc fracture. Who knew? There's a whole group of people who have Lisfranc fractures, and at least you can talk to them, and you get some compassion or whatever. So I've just gotten in the habit of doing that, of searching for, and 99.9% of the time there's some group online that can give me information. And like I said, doing that along with the 12 steps is just really helpful.
yeah. And it's the old 12-step saying, take what you need and leave the rest.
Right.
Whatever works, that's what you take, and if it doesn't work, leave it behind. Um, and yeah, those groups are fantastic. I mean, we're living in an age when, everything that can come up comes up and is addressed, and there's outlets for all of it. So suffering is so unnecessary at this time in the world because there's so many places to get the help that people need. The hard
The
part,
only thing we need to do um, is know if it's real or it's AI. That's a whole
that
nother.
that's a whole new thing we got to deal with. Yes, and
Yeah.
I don't like that. I'm
Yeah.
I'm I'm really stymied by that, but yeah, I agree. Go ahead, Jill.
So, in my in my path of recovery, I recognized that I needed to be my my greatest authority
Mm.
in recovery. Not that God, that I do depend on God to support my I depend on my higher power. I let go of a lot, but I I'm noticing that 1 + 1 = 5.
Hmm.
That I just love that because that's exactly what I'm experiencing, and I think it's because I I've given up authority figures, and I'm my own authority figure, but I guess I really need to say my higher power is my authority figure. But I'm starting to see that my higher power is actually, it's myself. In a way, it's my own love of myself is what my higher power is. And I guess in the ACA program they call it your loving parent. Um, and today I had an actual experience where I shook my head. It's like, this is what they're talking about. So I'm recognizing every single day something happens where I just respond differently. My life is so free. So I was texting somebody, a loving, intimate text, thanking them for a gift they sent me. And after I sent the text, I thought, oh my gosh, I think it's in the wrong text thread. I think I text this to the wrong person. And so instead of what I used to do when I get that feeling that I made a mistake like that, and I'm going to have to be embarrassed and apologize to the person that was meant to go to someone else, I would sweat. I forgot all this about myself, but I would sweat. I would get tingles. My stomach would bother me. I'd go into critical voice. You're a fool. How could that happen? You're not paying attention. And instead, none of that happened. I just went, I think I might have sent that to the wrong person. And then I looked and I was curious, did I? And turned out I didn't. And I was like, oh, that's good. And I was done with it. So it's like I have because I took the time to discover what was my higher power, how could I rely on my higher power? I'm just in such a sense of peace. So it's just very cool. And so I used to do a lot of research, Like I would check with 5,000 websites and groups and things like that. And I do need to do some of it, but I'm understanding when is enough. Whereas before I always thought, no stone unturned, no stone unturned. Did you go through 25 stones? Okay, well, there's probably a 26th. And I'm not there anymore. I'm very relaxed. So I love the 1 + 1 = 5. Thank you.
Thanks, Jill. It sounds like you have the disease of more, which is what all addicts have. We just want more, even if it's just more information about the same damn thing. Um, that's how we operate. But it's great that you're seeing yourself in a new light, because when we can see the truth and we see the reality, it starts to actually happen in our life. And I think that's what you're experiencing. Um, and as far as God as an authority, I don't have God as an authority, but I do know that I do the footwork and I leave the end result up to God. So that means I'm doing 99% of it. And that's the way I feel it should be. It's my life. God's just my creator. And I would guess that my creator would want me to do my life as much as I could on my own. So that's what I tried to do. But I do leave the end result up to my higher power, because I have learned the very hard way that I have no power over end results, any of them, even my own. So yeah, I don't see God as an authority, but I definitely see it as it's a working relationship. We work together. And I do what I'm best at, and he does what he or she or it or they does what's best on their end.
Yeah, and it's just a big cloud of love.
Yeah, in a way it is, yeah. I was doing another group today, and it's one of Herb's groups, and it's the looking up words, and one of the words was love, and the people in the group were like, why would love be in there? Why do we have to look up that word? What's that even got to do with anything? And I was kind of surprised to hear that. And it wasn't one person, it was a few people that said it. And I was surprised because I feel like God is love. That's to me what love is. And ironically, when I looked up the word love from an old, like 1930s dictionary, it didn't mean what love means today. So I thought that was interesting because Bill put it in there as, what do you think about the word love? So, it's just really defining what we believe, what makes sense, and what keeps us anchored in reality. Even with our higher powers, we're still anchored in reality, and that's so important, so very important. But it's not easy. All right, does anyone else have anything they need to share or anything, burning desire, anything? Not, I'm going to go ahead and do the serenity prayer. If anyone wants to join, they can. God, please grant us the serenity to accept the things we cannot change, the courage to change the things we can, and the wisdom
To know
to know the difference. Thank you, everyone. Great meeting, great ideas. Really opened up my mind. I love it. Thank you all. I'm very grateful.
Absolutely. Thank you so
Thank
much.
you.
This is awesome.
Thanks, Heidi.
Thank
Every
you.
minute of it.
Bye-bye.
Thanks,
Thank you.
Mark.
You are a treasure. Thank
Thanks, everyone. I will see you next week. If you have any questions, just shoot me an email.